During a time of intense turmoil, rose a rather audacious and outrageous character. In a time of warlords competing for more power, ZongChang stuck up for his bizarre antics, widely remembered as the dogma general, but not for the reasons you may think. Born in the Yi County of Shandong, China, to an alcoholic father who was working as a head shaver. No, not a barber, but instead someone who'd shave your hair off, like all of it. And a witch/exorcist mother, already quite a recipe for disaster. Zhang's early career would consist of working odd jobs here and there, like being a bouncer, pay crime, and prospector work. At some point, Zhang moved to Siberia, learning Russian, and even served as auxiliary for the Russian Imperial Army during the Russo-Japanese War. Eventually, something just clicked inside of Zhang, and he decided to pursue his criminal endeavors full-time by becoming a bandit in the Chinese countryside, and even became the leader of his group. At the time, China was seeing some heavy unrest, with the Qing dynasty falling, ending the long monarchy rule, and replacing it with the newly found Republic of China. This created a power vacuum, with many opposing factions competing with one another for control during what was known as the Warlord era of China. In 1911, Zhang joined the Green Standard Army and proved himself to be a natural when it came to military leadership, when he managed a group of soldiers during the Xinhai Revolution. He managed his group so well that his commanding officer, Cheng Deshuan, even appointed Zhang as his successor. During the Second Revolution of 1913, Feng was killed in battle, leading to Zhang taking his place as commanding officer under the general Feng Zhang. Now Zhang proved himself to be so effective in the battlefield that when Feng became the president of China, he enlisted Zhang as the commander of his personal guards. Looking for the next step in his life, Zhang would return to Manchuria in 1922 to fight alongside the Fengshen clique of the warlord Zhang Zuolin. And this is where the shenanigans really begin. Zhang was invited as a guest to Zuolin's birthday party, while everyone was doing their best to impress the warlord with the most extravagant of gifts and verbal bulllicking. Zhang decided to not even show up. Instead, Zhang has sent 2 empty goodie baskets. Now these are the baskets that Chinese laborers would use at the time. Zuolin was rather confused by the gift, but after giving it a good few minutes, he realized it was meant to symbolize how Zhang was ready to shoulder any responsibility that the warlord would give him. Now Zuolin would give Zhang a commanding position, and in return Zhang said that he was only ready to meet Zuolin after he'd proved himself in battle. Talk about nerve. Zhang rose through the ranks of the Fengshen clique after proving his might in battle. He'd enlist Russians that fled during the Civil War and dressed them up in traditional Tsarist uniform to remind them of the good time before the communists took over. Zhang was one of the first Chinese generals to incorporate women as part of his army. He'd have Russian nurses teach his soldiers basic medical treatments and first aid, improving their life expectancy and morale. On the topic of morale, to make his soldiers feel noticed, Zhang decided to have a mass promotion, giving everyone a nicer title. But there was a slight problem. In order to make his promotion official, he'd have to give everyone medals. But Zhang ran out of stars, so he had to get creative. After opening a first packet of cigarettes, he got an idea. What if instead of wasting expensive metals, he'd get a bit more cost effective, and instead give them medals made out of cigarette foil? Needless to say, the officers were not very happy when they looked at the medals and the shit would already tear and crumple. In 1924, Zhang would take part in the war between the Fengshen clique and the neighboring Zilis, capturing Shanghai a few miles down the line. Now Zhang had a special relation to Shanghai, as he'd frequent the city often with his boss's son, as they both shared the love for opium and prostitutes. After only 3 years as general, ZongChang earned himself the position of Warlord of Shandong, a position he'd take full advantage of. Zhang would place a tax over everything he could, running his people dry and starving the local banks. This still wasn't enough for Zhang, so he decided to do what we all wish we could do, and he just got to cranking the roller and printing more money. As a result, Zhang printed so much money that his currency became pretty much worthless. But now Zhang is a man who does not believe in inflation, so he kept paying everyone the same wages. Public executions were quite common under his rule. Anyone who wronged Zhang or even said something he did not like would be sentenced to death. When a local newspaper criticized his ways of ruling, he had the editor executed. His favorite method of execution was known as splitting, where he'd split someone's head down the middle with his sword. Whenever Zhang wanted to set an example, he'd hang dissidents from telephone cables and leave them there for others to see. Zhang was a well-known womanizer with about 30 to 50 concubines from an estimated 26 different nationalities. Now with the amount of women at his disposal, Zhang had trouble keeping up with the names, so he decided to simply give each one a number. Zhang may be remembered as a ruthless warlord, but he also had a softer side to him. One day he walked in on one of his concubines having an affair with one of his soldiers. When they confessed to being in love, Zhang let them be, saying, "Who am I to get in the way of love?" A fate that, as we'll find out later, some were not as lucky to get. Now you may still be wondering as to where did the dogmeat general nickname come from. Don't worry, it had nothing to do with eating dogs, and instead he came from being an avid gambler. Zhang liked to play a game in particular known as Pai Gao, which translates to English as eating dog meat. Although Zhang did also eat the meat of black Chow Chow dogs on a daily basis, as it was a common belief at the time that the meat would boost a man's virility. Zhang liked all sorts of games, but when he got to see a basketball game for the first time, he was rather perplexed, confused even. He did not understand the rules, and felt embarrassed by the fact that they were only playing with one ball. Being the hospital guest that he is, Zhang ordered that everyone gets a ball. Now, good times don't last forever, and in 1927, a severe drought hit Shandong. ZongChang decided to take matters into his own hand, so he went to the temple of Zhang, the sky god, and in full view of everyone, slapped the shit out of Xian's statue, then began swearing at it. Later, Zhang went home and dropped the hardest diss track of the Warlord era in the form of poetry. Praying for Rain by ZongChang. The sky god is also named Zhang. Why does he make life hard for me? If it doesn't rain in 3 days, I'll demolish your temple, then have cannons bombard your mom. Zhang kept to his word and he ordered his artillery to fire to the sky. Be it coincidence or not, but the following day it began raining. ZongChang was a man of his word, someone who stick through with his promises. He'd often show up on the battlefront with a coffin for himself, signifying that he was ready to die, and even made a bold claim that he'd rather win his battle or return in a coffin. Now Zhang did not always win his battles, and on one instance he did return in a coffin. No, he didn't get killed, or this video wouldn't be as long as it is. But after having to retreat, Zhang paraded through town, being carried by his men while he was in his coffin, puffing a fat Cuban cigar. Now Zhang was no academic. Whenever he was asked about his former education, Zhang would tell them that he went to the College of the Forest, which meant that he was a bandit. Although only being about semi-literate, he did have his thing for poems. He has some of his best ones. Poem About Bastards by ZongChang. You tell me to do this, he tells me to do that. You all bastards, go fuck your mother. Untitled by ZongChang. Someone asked me how many women I have. I really don't know either. Yesterday a boy called me dad. I don't know who his mother is. Really heart-touching stuff. Now Zhang's rule, albeit wild, was short-lived. And in 1928, the National Revolutionary Army of China would move into Shandong, capturing more than 20,000 of his soldiers, and almost even Zhang himself. The warlord had no choice but to flee to Dalian, Japan. Alongside with him, he brought his wealth, mother, and money concubines. Zhang was not very happy with the loss of his power, and while in Japan, he was scheming on how to get back. In 1929, Zhang alongside some of the warlords went back to Shandong to regain the territory. Zhang managed to gather thousands of his loyal followers and began a major revolt against Liu Zhenyan, who was the new warlord in town, as well as a short-lived rebellion in Beijing. The revolt caused a lot of destruction, but after months of fighting, Zhang had to flee back to Japan. Now back in Japan, after having had escaped death again, Zhang went back to Dalian. By this time the local authorities told Zhang that they could no longer show his protection, so he decided to move over to Beppu, where he stayed under the radar just minding his business. But that was up until Prince Zhang Kai decided to start messing with one of Zhang's many concubines, something which he did not like. So, as one day Zhang Kai was walking down the street, Zhang shot him from his hotel window, killing him instantly. When he had to go to the Japanese court, Zhang's claim was that he was cleaning his gun by his window, and it just so happened to go off and hit Zhang Kai in the head, someone who he had problems with. But the court were not buying any of his nonsense, so they gave Zhang an ultimatum. Either he spends 15 days in prison or pays a $150 fine. He chose the fine. At the time, Japan wanted to grow as an imperial force, and they were looking to expand westwards into China. They had no reason to start war with China, so they just simply made up one in what was known as the Mukden Incident. Japanese soldiers planted a small amount of dynamite on the railway in their territory and detonated it, trying to shift the blame on the Chinese for the attack. The explosion was so weak that the railway was still functionable, and the train even went through after the explosion. Regardless, now they had their reason to start moving into China. The Japanese government arranged a deal with Zhang that he returned to China to start his army again, but this time he would be fighting for the Japanese interest. While back in Shandong, Zhang was in a celebratory mood, and he went back to see his old pals again. Word quickly spread around about Zhang being back in town, and he greets Zhang Zisheng, the nephew of one of the many enemies whose head is split. Zisheng saw that Zhang was about to board the train, and began firing, killing him instantly. Some believed that the murder was orchestrated by the local government, as the boy was never really charged for the murder. Zhang's funeral was full of mourners and stretched over 3.2 kilometers. Some were genuine admirers and friends of Zhang, and some were paid to be there. Some wanted to make sure the fucker is dead, and some wanted to fill their pockets. A soap clerk by the name of Liang Zhouyu found a check for $30,000 on Zhang and cashed it out as soon as he could. Word quickly spread around, and Zhang's grave became the target for robbers. During the Cultural Revolution, the Red Guards opened Zhang's grave to only find a single tablet. Even his body was snatched away. During a time of heavy unrest, Zhang was the most eccentric of warlords. Some people loved him for his charisma, seeing him as a real-life book character, but on the other hand, he's widely remembered as a wicked ruler, representing the excess of violence during the Warlord era. If you were to be a warlord, what shenanigans would you get up to? Drop your thoughts down below. But anyways, thank you for watching, make sure to like, subscribe and share the video. This was Nigu, and I'm out.